Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of our chairman, Charles Ramsey, and our executive director, Mike Pennington, thank you so much for joining today's virtual orientation session for applicants and prospective grantees for the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency's 2021 Gun Violence Reduction Grants Program. My name is Sam Cook, and I serve as a senior project manager within the executive offices here at PCCD. I'm also joined today by several other PCCD team members who will be supporting today's webinar, including members of our executive, program, and fiscal staff. First up, just a couple of housekeeping rules and a few reminders. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with participants via email once it becomes available. Please double check your audio settings to make sure that you're able to hear today's presentation using your computer or other device. We cannot hear you, but you will be able to submit questions through the Q&A feature within the live event. Questions that are submitted through this feature will not be visible to all participants, but will be received and reviewed by PCCD staff. PCCD staff have allotted 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this webinar to answer questions that have been submitted by participants through the Q&A feature. And to the extent possible, any questions that we are not able to address in today's webinar will be addressed through follow-up communications and guidance via email or through other methods. And then last but not least, a copy of PowerPoint slides from today's session will be emailed to participants and will also be posted onto PCCD's gun violence webpage. Moving forward to the rest of our agenda, we'll provide a brief overview of PCCD, including the agency's mission and programs. Then we'll provide an overview of the 2021 Gun Violence Reduction Grants funding announcement, just as a quick reminder. I'll then turn things over to my colleague, Heather Hewitt, who will be providing an overview of the EGrants system, which will be used to develop and submit your organization's formal application for funding. This overview will include important information about the registration process for individual users, as well as organizations and agencies, among other components. Next, we'll review application next steps, including a summary of the funding timeline, action steps, and application homework for organizations seeking funding, as well as a review of what expenses are and are not allowed under the FY 2021 Gun Violence Reduction Grant Program. And finally, as we noted previously, we will be reserving 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this session just to answer any questions that have been submitted by you using the Q&A feature of the Teams Live webinar platform. So with that roadmap ahead of us, we will go ahead and get started. So first up, we just wanted to provide a brief overview for folks who may not be familiar of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, or PCCD, as we are more commonly known. So for those of you that aren't aware, our agency was established in 1978 through Pennsylvania state law and serves as the Commonwealth's justice planning and policymaking agency. PCCD's mission is to enhance the quality, coordination, and planning within the criminal and juvenile justice systems, to facilitate the delivery of services to victims of crime, and to increase the safety of our communities. We are a relatively small state agency housed within the executive office with approximately 100 employees working across 4 offices and underlying units to facilitate the work of 6 advisory committees, the School Safety and Security Committee, and 2 training boards, as well as implement the actions taken by the Commission. As you can see on this slide, PCCD's responsibilities and programs fall into a number of different areas, including funding and grants, technical assistance, data and research, victims compensation and training, among other responsibilities. PCCD also administers a number of state and federal funding streams and provides grants supporting best practices and innovation at the state and local levels. These are mainly focused on criminal and juvenile justice and related systems, victim services, prevention, and public safety. In recent years, PCCD has also administered state funding streams focused on school safety and security, as well as programs like the Nonprofit Security Grant Program as an additional example. PCCD also provides technical assistance for a variety of programs and initiatives, including evidence-based prevention programs through a partnership with Epicenter, as well as a statewide overdose prevention technical assistance center in partnership with the University of Pittsburgh. And we're also planning to provide a number of technical assistance supports as part of our gun violence reduction grant program as well. Our agency also provides statewide statistical and analytical services for criminal justice and public safety data, producing resources such as digital dashboards, gathering information through statewide surveys such as the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, and other activities. The agency is specifically tasked with providing services to victims of crime and is responsible for administration of the state's crime victims compensation fund, as well as child advocacy centers. PCCD is also responsible for coordinating training for sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, and constables, county probation officers, as well as other justice-related stakeholders. We'd welcome you to learn more about PCCD and our programs, resources, and initiatives by visiting our website at pccd.pa.gov. And I'd also encourage folks to take a look at our strategic framework, which outlines the agency's overall goals and other priorities for the next 5 years. So moving forward to the Gun Violence Reduction Grant Program and why you are all here. So as you may recall from the original funding announcement released back in May, PCCD's 2021 Gun Violence Reduction Grant Program is guided by 3 primary goals. First, this funding was designed to promote immediate safety for individuals living and working within neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia and other communities in Pennsylvania with high rates of shootings and homicides. Second, the grant program was designed to provide effective, community-designed and community-led strategies to decrease the number and frequency of shootings and increase public safety in both the short and the long term. And finally, this grant funding was prioritized and will be prioritized for nonprofit organizations working at the grassroots level to prevent and reduce gun violence, with a particular emphasis on supporting groups that have not previously received funding from PCCD. And I should say we are very excited that for many of you, this is your first time getting recommended for funding and application through our agency. So we certainly are thrilled by that, and also recognize that this is a new process for many of you, and that's part of why we organized today's virtual orientation session. Moving forward, just to refresh folks' memory on the funding announcement components, again, that were released back in May when you all started your initial funding request forms. So as seen on this slide, the funding announcement included some details around who was eligible to come in for funding. So that included nonprofit organizations as well as units of local government. Funding will support proposed project activities over a 33-month period between October 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. Applicants are eligible to request up to and no more than $225,000. And each of you received information about the initial funding request maximum amount that was tied to your specific project that was recently approved by advisory committees. Applicants selected in the initial round of requests, which is all of you, are now being asked to complete a formal application in eGrants. So just worth noting that in addition to today's orientation session and training, PCCD staff will certainly be available to provide technical support to any of you and the organizations you are working with and for any component of the formal eGrants application process. So with that, I'm very happy to turn things over to my colleague Heather, who will be walking you all through our EGrants registration process.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, everybody. We're going to do a quick walkthrough of the EGrants registration process, as Sam mentioned. Sam, if you could go ahead to the next slide. The first step to the EGrants process is getting the agency registered in EGrants. And we do have an agency registration request form on our website. If you look at the slide here, it does direct you from our PCCD homepage. There is an EGrants icon. You can select that. It will pull up a PDF version of the form, and there is also a registration guide to give you some pointers on filling that out. The agency must be properly registered in eGrants if you intend to apply for a grant. And once that form is completed, there is a resource account on the slide and on the form that you can return it to, and our eGrants help desk will enter that information into eGrants. For user registration, which is the next step, every user must have an individual eGrants registration, eGrants account. You cannot share, and when you go to register, there are 4 different types of accounts. We have existing PCCD eGrants users that do and do not have Keystone login accounts, and then we have new users that do and do not have Keystone login accounts. So depending on your situation, our guide will walk you through the steps you need to take to get registered. So to register, again, you can start at the homepage, our PCCD homepage. There's the funding icon, and you'll go to the School Safety and Security Application and Administration Guides, to where you'll find the user registration walkthrough. This is also linked in the presentation here today. So if you click on that, it will take you through, as I said, each one of those 4 scenarios, depending on your situation. After you're registered, you do need to complete the new user role request form. Again, from our homepage, there's an eGrants icon, and you'll find that on that screen. This form is necessary to establish the roles for you to actually access your grant in eGrants. So even though you're a registered user, unless you have that security access to that specific grant, you won't be able to do anything with it. And we say necessary roles because there are fiscal roles, there's program roles, so it does matter which ones you have depending on your role in this application process. And again, this form can be completed and sent to the resource account listed on the screen. Go ahead, Sam. And just to give a brief overview of those user roles, we do have a financial creator, financial reader, program creator, program reader, a submission, and the user manager. The main, for example, if you're the person that's going to be going in and completing this application from start to finish, you would definitely need the 2 creator roles, financial and program, the submission, because you will not be able to actually submit the application without that role. And then there's also a user manager role. And this person, if you have other users that are going to be registering to also work on the grant, this person can give them the appropriate access when needed. And also note, every agency must register 2 users in order to complete their application. So you will need to have 2 contacts that are linked up to your agency in eGrants to be able to move forward. Every agency should have the user manager security role. So when you have again, for an example, maybe the main person that's going to be working on this, if they are the user manager, like I said, they will approve requests and maintain existing security for users established within their agency. So again, the help guide there is on the screen, and that'll walk you through when your other user submits their request in eGrants. The user manager is able to go in, see that request, approve it, reject it, and move forward. And Sam, I think that wraps it up for the eGrants briefing, so I will send it back to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Heather. So next up, we're going to talk about kind of application next steps. So now that you've gotten the brief overview of eGrants, we'll sort of talk about, from a process perspective, when the eGrants application process will open officially for the Gun Violence Reduction Grant Program, and just some other information about what we're asking each of you to think about in preparation for that next phase. So on this slide, you can see the boxes shaded in light gray are processes and steps on the timeline that are already behind us. So just to recap where we've been, and then we'll get to where we're going. The initial funding request, that first box on the left-hand side. So obviously, as you are all familiar, there was an initial request form that we opened up online through SurveyMonkey that opened on May 18th. We hosted webinars for prospective applicants. I know many of you participated in that process. Those took place on June 1st and 3rd. And then the deadline for initial funding requests to be submitted through SurveyMonkey was June 30th. Worth noting, literally as that funding announcement and application process closed, PCCD did receive some additional funding within the state budget. And so we are able, fortunately, to be able to fund additional applications beyond the amount that we initially thought we would, because of that newly allocated funding. So in any case, once the applications were submitted, we initiated a new review and selection process during the month of July. The Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, or CJAC as we refer to it, reviewed and approved initial selections when they met on August 11th. And in addition, the School Safety and Security Committee also reviewed and approved initial selections just yesterday on August 25th. Where we are now is opening up the formal eGrants application process, and obviously an orientation for our prospective applicants and grantees. So we're hosting a virtual orientation session today, as well as on August 31st to walk folks through the eGrants process and the application process. As I mentioned, the eGrants application is not open right now, but we are planning to open it on September 1st. So that's when folks will be able to actually log in, assuming you are set up to do so, and open up that application and begin your work. That application period will close on September 24th. And so if you have any questions in between, as you're going through that process or trying to get set up in eGrants, please don't hesitate to reach out to our staff. We are available to provide technical support and assistance through that process. Once the eGrants application process closes, then we'll go through the final review and approval process. So the Commission will review and hopefully approve selected applicants pending resolution of any outstanding or fiscal or programmatic concerns when they meet on September 8th. And then between September and October, we will be scheduling initial onboarding meetings with applicants and grantees, with program and fiscal staff, just to get folks further familiarized with our grant procedures and processes, and also to talk about project goals and potential outcomes. Project period for awards, just as a reminder, it's October 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2024. And just a reminder that the first quarterly program and fiscal reports are going to be due in January of 2022. So now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Chris Epica, to talk a little bit about the process for registering as a Commonwealth vendor.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everyone. So in order to eventually receive grant payments from PCCD, your agencies have to be registered as a vendor in the Commonwealth's vendor system. So if you already have a vendor number and you know you have a vendor number, that's obviously fine. You don't have to register. But if you are unsure, or you do not know that you do not have a vendor number, you'll want to go to the Commonwealth's vendor registration page, which is linked in the presentation here. And once you get there, there are 4 different types of vendors in within the Commonwealth, and you'll want to click the non-procurement vendor link. You'll also want to have your employer identification number handy. When you go to this website, you'll be required to enter that, and the system will tell you if you have a vendor number or not. If you do not have a vendor number, it will continue to the next page, which will require you to enter your more agency information, such as your agency name, address, and details like that, so that you can be assigned a vendor number. If a vendor number already is in the system for your agency, it will also tell you that, and it will ask you to enter the vendor number. If at that point you do not know your vendor number, we can help you find that, and I would just ask that you reach out to us for that information, and we can assist. One other thing you should have available is your banking information. So when you establish your vendor number, you can set up your banking information so that we can make direct deposits via ACH with grant payments. So Sam, I think that covers the vendor registration portion of this, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. All right, so a couple of action steps. So obviously, as Chris just noted, you should ensure that your organization is registered as a vendor. So be sure to check that link out if you are not sure. And you should also take steps to register in eGrants, again, if you are not already registered, so that you're ready to begin building and submitting your formal application when that opens on September 1st. And you should also keep an eye out for an email from PCCD staff to schedule an onboarding call with program and fiscal staff. Our plan is to really schedule those on a rolling basis as folks kind of put the finishing touches on their final applications. A little bit of quote unquote homework for you all. So we thought it may be helpful, again, since the application isn't quite open yet, but things to think about and prepare for before it is opened. You should begin developing a budget detail and project narrative that explains in greater detail than your initial funding request form how your organization will utilize fiscal year 2021 gun violence reduction grant program funds. And you'll see on the slide that we put a note. You should provide more detail, but you must make sure that your budget that's developed is using and referencing what your organization originally proposed in your initial funding request that was submitted through SurveyMonkey. And I know we've had outreach from some groups already just asking for submitted applications and can we get a copy of that? So if your organization is in need of that original information, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can provide that for you if you don't have a record yourself. In addition to the budget detail and project narrative components, we'd also encourage you to start thinking about potential data that you either already track for an existing program that you're expanding or that you'd like to start tracking to measure a program's success and progress along the way. We can certainly provide you with assistance through that process, and we are planning to provide additional information around some performance indicators that PCCD will be selecting as part of this grant program, and we'll be talking in greater detail about that with all of you during those program onboarding calls. And in addition, just make sure that you're paying attention to email and just responding to any requests for additional information from PCCD staff. As we go through the formal eGrants application, once that opens, it's likely that our team may have information we're looking from you to clarify. And so just being able to be responsive to those information requests will be extremely helpful for our team. If you have folks who aren't currently getting our emails or who you want to make sure are looped in on information requests, again, making sure that the right users are assigned in eGrants is certainly a helpful starting point. But if you also want to make sure that we have the right folks on your team on a mailing list, please don't hesitate to provide that information to us through our existing staff email accounts that you can reach out to and give us those names. So we talked about homework kind of including developing a budget detail. So just wanted to make sure that we refreshed folks' memories around what activities and expenses can and cannot be supported with this particular grant funding. So as you can see on this slide, these are the expenses and activities that can be supported using fiscal year 2021 gun violence reduction grant program funds. So funding can support expenses that are associated with direct project activities and program implementation, including but not limited to the following on this slide. That includes salary and benefits for personnel, full or part-time, including overtime, contractors or consultants, facilitating referrals to community-based service providers and programs, and that can include incentives or stipends for participants, just as an example, supplies and equipment, training, travel and transportation expenses, and that can include vehicle leases, indirect costs not exceeding 10% of the total project budget, and any other activities necessary to meet the needs of programs and participants. And again, in your budget detail, you're going to make sure that you're linking up those proposed activities, being clear about what the expenses are, and then providing a clear narrative about how those connect to your project narrative and the activities that are proposed. So that covers what you can use dollars for. This slide provides an overview of the activities and expenses that cannot be supported with grant funding. So those include any activities around research and evaluation, such as data analysis, focus groups, those types of things. And in addition, we're also prohibiting indirect costs that exceed 10% of the total project budget. We already covered the research and evaluation piece. We also are not allowing construction costs, costs associated with land acquisition, lobbying and political contributions, vehicle purchases, so different than vehicle leases, which we just covered is an allowable expense. And finally, any honoraria or bonuses are also not allowable under this grant program. A couple of reminders, just as we head into the Q&A portion. So I see a couple of folks have already typed in some questions and answers. We appreciate that. If you do have any questions, feel free to start typing that now. But just before we get to the Q&A period, a few reminders on this slide that we wanted to touch on. First and foremost, again, the eGrants application window will open on September 1st and will close on September 24th. We will certainly provide an email to everybody indicating when that eGrants application has officially opened on those dates. You will also, again, need to be registered in eGrants to access and submit an application. Seems obvious, but worth repeating. And an important caveat and note that an invitation to submit an application in eGrants does not necessarily guarantee that a project will be funded. And in addition, PCCD does reserve the right to kind of adjust or make any sort of changes that we see fit in terms of allowable expenses or things that are included within budgets. Awards are not final until receipt of a formal award letter from PCCD. So just because you submit an application, that's different from receiving a formal award letter. Applications will be reviewed by our team on a rolling basis. So the sooner your organization responds to a fiscal or programmatic concern, if it arises, the quicker PCCD can process and make final award determinations. PCCD is not liable for any costs that are incurred prior to the official start date of the award. And last but not least, organizations may only request reimbursement for expenditures that are actually approved in your budgets. So you can't request reimbursement for things that fall outside of what you originally proposed within your application. So with that, we've now arrived at the Q&A and questions sort of portion of our agenda. As a reminder, you can use the Q&A feature to submit your questions if you haven't already done so. We will be reviewing and we'll answer as many questions and topics as we can over the next couple of minutes. And just as a reminder, to the extent possible, if there's any questions that we're not able to address in today's session, we can certainly address those and answer them through follow-up communications and guidance after today's session. So with that, I'm going to head on over to the Q&A function and see what questions have come in. I see we have several. But again, feel free to use that Q&A piece if you haven't already typed in your question, and we'll get to them as they come in. I see there was a question around attendance of webinars, so I'll probably start there. So the question was, are we expected to attend one webinar or both webinars? So the expectation is that organizations participate in one virtual orientation session. So if you're here today, your organization has fulfilled that requirement. Certainly, if you have team members that weren't available today that you think would benefit from participating, you can certainly direct them to attend next Tuesday's webinar. As we mentioned before, we will be recording this session and posting that recording so that others can kind of refresh their memory and take part if they weren't available in the live session. One person asked, what are the hours for technical support? Will there be any after hours or Saturday hours? Heather, I think this is an eGrants related question, so I'm going to publish it and let you kind of take it away in terms of kind of when our help desk is available.
Thanks, Sam. Our eGrants help desk is open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4. There are no evening or Sunday hours.
Heather, is it safe to say there's an email that can be used as well? So if you do have questions outside of those hours, you can certainly submit them, but they just wouldn't be answered until the next business day. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yep. The resource account is in the slides, and there is a phone number that if you call and leave a voicemail, we also, same as Sam said, we will return your call as soon as we're available on the next business day.
Great, thanks, Heather. Another individual asked, my organization already has a grant at PCCD, so do we have to re-register in eGrants or not? So Heather, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Yes, if you are already registered in eGrants, if your agency is already registered in eGrants yourself as an individual, you do not have to do anything further for registration unless you have new employees that are coming in. If you're not sure if you or your agency is registered, please give us a call or send an email and we can verify that information for you.
Great, thanks, Heather. So we had a question, is eGrants utilized solely for the formal grant application and reporting, or is it utilized throughout the grant period of performance? So I'll take a stab at answering this, and then I'll certainly let Chris and Heather jump in if they'd like to add more. But we are asking folks to submit a formal application in eGrants in large part because the eGrant system is going to be the system that's utilized throughout the period of performance for both fiscal and programmatic reports, and those are due on a quarterly basis throughout the period of the grant. And so it's really important for your team not just to be able to submit the application in eGrants, but also to be familiar with the system, since that's what you'll be using to provide updates to our team throughout the grant period if you're approved. Chris or Heather, anything to add on that front?
I think you covered it, Sam.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys. There was a question, is there a schedule and/or format for reporting that we can find? Chris, do you want to take that one maybe from a fiscal side?
Sure. So fiscal reports are required quarterly, and you'll basically report your actual expenditures against your budget line items. So you'll have a line item for each cost in different categories, such as personnel, benefits, supplies. And when you go to report every quarter, you will report what was actually spent in that quarter against each line item within each budget category. And those expenditures will accumulate. You'll see your cumulative expenditures in the following quarters, and then you'll add your current quarter's expenditures, and you'll see that cumulative expenditures continue to build quarter after quarter. We do allow reports to be submitted more often if you need to, such as monthly, but organizations are required to submit a financial report at least quarterly.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. And on the program side, I'll just add part of why we're having program onboarding calls with grantees that are selected is to also walk you through kind of the format for quarterly program reporting as well. And that'll include a discussion of performance indicators as well as other information that groups will need to be prepared to submit on a quarterly basis. Our next question is around kind of the budget submission component of eGrants. So the question is, does the eGrants application have to match individual budget lines exactly as submitted in SurveyMonkey, or just match the total overall? Chris, do you want to handle that budget related question?
Sure. I would say that the line items may not match up exactly, but we will be looking to ensure that, you know, the cost you budget kind of match up with the program that you said you were going to implement in your SurveyMonkey application. So I guess what I'm saying is we would not want to see a change of scope or a major change of scope in the program. We understand that budget line items, you know, you may have a different idea of how to get that task accomplished or tasks accomplished based on what you put in the SurveyMonkey application. So we'd be looking just to make sure that the costs that you enter in the actual eGrants application line up with what you said you were going to do originally. I think, Sam, I don't know, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I don't, just that I forgot to unmute to say thank you. All right, I'm looking, thanks to everybody for your very active participation. We got a number of questions that have come through. So looking at our next one, it will toggle. Okay, this question, I think, Chris, you're going to be on the spot again too. This is around the Commonwealth vendor registration process. So this individual asked, my organization is registered in the Commonwealth vendor and has been for many years, but I can't access it because I'm not the administrator. The admin has long ago retired. Trying to get this resolved. Just will this prevent our org from receiving payments? Any advice for this individual regarding that situation?
No, I would just say it will. Well, one, it will not prevent your organization from either receiving a grant or receiving payments. That's something we can work out as you submit your application in eGrants. I would just ask that you reach out to and you'll see this in eGrants. You'll have an assigned program and fiscal staff person. Just reach out to the fiscal staff person. They'll be more than happy to help you either find your vendor number or connect you to the Commonwealth's vendor unit, the correct person at the vendor unit that can assist you in either setting up a new vendor number or locating your old vendor number and getting that active again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. One question that someone asked is kind of around the cohort of folks who were recommended for funding. So someone asked what organizations received this funding and where are they from? So just as a clarification, there was a group of 53 organizations that were recommended to move forward in the funding process and invited to submit a formal application through our eGrant system, including folks on this call. We are planning, that information can certainly be requested. It was publicly vetted through our advisory committees, as we referenced earlier, but we are planning to wait to make a formal public announcement of final awards after the formal eGrants process and review concludes. So that person who asked was anonymous. So if you want to touch base offline, feel free to email me directly and we can hook you up with that information. But that's sort of how the process will work. For our next question, this is around budgets. And so I'll rely on Chris and maybe some other colleagues on the line to weigh in. So the question is, if we initially applied for funding to support one fiscal year of programs, are we able to expand the budget request to include the full possible grant period, which is 33 months? Chris or others, thoughts on that?
I would say you would have to stay in the initial amount that was approved. I think we can have the project period go the full 33 months, but that doesn't mean we can expand the amount that we would be able to award at this point. Okay, and maybe that's something that we want to, you know, maybe email specific details and we can take a look at that offline as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Kevin asked, how can I have a copy of the slides to review with our board of directors? So Kevin, thanks for sending your email. I will not blast that around to the group. But as we mentioned before, we will be making a copy of the slides available publicly on our website. So we'll be sure to send a follow-up after the session concludes with a link there so that you can circulate that information as needed through your colleagues or other stakeholders for follow-up. Our next question is, will the $225,000, which is the max, be awarded per year or across the 3-year period of the program? So I think this gets at kind of the fiscal reporting and reimbursement process. So Chris, do you want to maybe walk folks through what that looks like?
Yeah, so I talked briefly earlier about payments, about fiscal reporting, and how it's required at least monthly or at least quarterly, and you can submit reports more often if necessary. And based on that report is how we generate payments. So whatever your expenditures are for the period that you're reporting for, whether that be monthly or quarterly, we make payments on a reimbursement basis. If there are situations where you're making a large purchase and you may not have the cash to, upfront to pay for a large purchase, we will be able to work with organizations to kind of mitigate that situation. But we would just ask that you reach out to us so that we can help you with that situation when the time comes.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm just looking at some questions, skimming through. Okay, so this question, our organization has a new initiative, therefore no actual data currently available around the proposal. We serve as a convener working with other established organizations. May we share data from our partners to support our new program? Absolutely. So similar to what you did within your initial funding request form, where we asked you to kind of describe your proposed activities, who you'll be working with. Just make sure that within your project narrative and other components of the formal application in eGrants that you're being really detailed around who will be performing what specific activities, whether that's data collection and performance monitoring or really any other specific activities that you're describing within your project narrative. And we can certainly work with you if you're not quite sure what types of performance indicators might make the most sense based on what you and your partners currently collect or have available. We can certainly work with you on the program side to kind of have a conversation about what performance indicators may make sense for your project and go from there. Our next question is around leasing vehicles. So the question is, what is the max terms for a lease vehicle that can be used for transportation to events approved under the program? Chris, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but any thoughts on that question?
I think we probably need a little more detail, but if max terms refers to length of time, we would be able to reimburse for costs that are within the project period. If the person asking the question was asking something different, I would just ask that, maybe send that email in offline and we can talk about it.
Okay, great. Next question is around kind of original budget versus newly submitted budget. So the question is, in my original budget, I was going for hiring a full-time staff member. What if I would like to switch it instead to consultants to perform the work? Will that pose a problem? Chris, you wanna weigh in and throw in your thoughts for that?
Sure. I don't see an issue with that as long as the purpose of the position is the same. Whether it's an actual employee or a contracted position, I don't think wouldn't make much of a difference to us.
Okay, perfect. And we'll give you a breather since you've answered a lot of questions. Now Heather's in the hot seat. So Heather, there's an eGrants related question from Lynette. They asked 2 people from the program need to register for eGrants. Do the 2 people need to register at the same time?
They don't have to, but if you are, if they're both going to be working on the application, then it kind of just makes sense to have them register at the same time. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. If it doesn't, feel free, Lynette, to write back another question we can clarify, or we can answer offline. There is another question around sort of the eGrants application versus the SurveyMonkey process. So clarifying whether or not it would be identical for the SurveyMonkey questions or if there's additional questions requesting more details. So it won't look exactly the same. As we mentioned on the front end, you're going to be asked to provide a project narrative and a budget detail. So there will be instructions that are provided within sort of those eGrants prompts for you. But essentially, we're asking you to provide additional detail above and beyond what you've already submitted through SurveyMonkey to clarify what money will be spent on and for what activities, and sort of finalizing those details. So similar, but not quite exactly the same. And certainly if you have any questions once the application period opens up and you're not sure about, you know, certain questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out and we can always talk you through it. Our next question, Chris, I think this is one for you, is around whether or not this is a reimbursement-based grant.
Yeah, and I think we had a similar question earlier. It is, we do make payments, all our grants on reimbursement based, but we'll, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we will work with organizations if they would have an issue fronting money for like large purchases. I would just ask that you reach out to us when the time comes, to your fiscal staff, as I noted before, that's identified on, will be identified on your eventual eGrants application. Reach out to that person, and then, you know, we'll be able to work with you.
Great, thanks, Chris. We got another question similar, I think, to the who else is coming in for funding type of question. So how many other organizations are applying and how many total project awards are available to be made? So what I would say for that is you all received a notification regarding the initial approval of your initial funding request and an invitation to submit an application. The details of what was approved, that's what you'll need to stick with. So when Chris was saying you still have to stick with your same budget number that was approved, that's what he's talking about. So if you have questions about that or want to talk through anything further, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. But you all are kind of the cohort that will be invited and able to make application and sort of who will be evaluating through that application period. Our next question is around data reporting. So this individual asks, is PCCD requiring a specific data reporting platform such as ETO, or are agencies able to utilize other reporting mechanisms for programmatic data reports? So I'll take a quick stab at this one, and certainly my colleagues can weigh in if I've missed anything, but we will be using EGrants as our program and fiscal reporting platform and our grants management platform for the life of the program. Certainly there are some required fields on the program reporting side, including performance indicators that we'll be asking grantees to complete on at least a quarterly basis. The source of how you aggregate and then collect and report data that can be sent in through eGrants, we're not prescribing a particular data platform or anything like that on the back end. So you will have to submit that data through eGrants every quarter, but in terms of how you kind of manage and collect the information on your side, we're not requiring any particular platform for that purpose. Another person asked, how soon will these slides be available for review? Very soon. So as we wrap up today's webinar, we will be providing an information email kind of wrapping things up and sending it out to all of you who participated today, and that will include a link for finding the webinar slides right on our website. So stay tuned. Probably later this afternoon, you'll get an email with that. An individual asked, 53 organizations were selected to move to the next step, but how many are slated for final determination? Chris, I hate to put you on the spot, but do you want to maybe address this question, just kind of how our eGrants application process works and kind of the final award determination process?
Sure. So as we were kind of describing here, you're going to submit an application in eGrants, and if we have questions or even issues with your application, you'll see that come back through the system to you, either the questions or the application for you to make corrections or revisions that we've requested. And then eventually we'll get to the point where we're ready to award that application. And you'll see the status in eGrants go from under review to open awarded, and then an award letter will also be available in eGrants, which is your official notification. It's awarding the funds, in which you will have to countersign that letter and send it back to us. And once that is done, that is when you officially have your award that we are all discussing here today. And that's when you can start implementing your project. And I just want to reiterate that we can't reimburse for costs prior to the start date. And I would really hold off until you get your official award notification.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. We got another question about cash flow. So we're a small nonprofit that has very little cash on hand. What is the cash flow like under this grant to cover our budgeted services? So Chris, I think you touched on this a little bit before around the reimbursement question, but any thoughts on kind of this particular area?
I would just say, as I mentioned, that we can accept financial reports more often than quarterly, like monthly, and even more often than that. So the more often you submit, the more often you'll get reimbursed, and obviously cut down the time for you to actually receive the cash from, or the money from, the state treasury. Generally, when we make a payment, when we initiate a payment, it takes 30 days to make it from us through all the other agencies within the Commonwealth and eventually from the state treasury. So, if you are in a situation like that and, just even that doesn't work for you, where monthly is not enough, I would again ask you to just reach out to your fiscal person that's identified in EGrants, and we can talk about it further and see if there's anything else. If there's other things we can do to assist your agency.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
We got a couple of questions. I'm looking at the time and we only have about 5 or so more minutes. So thank you all. I know we said 15 minutes, but we certainly appreciate everyone's questions. There was a question around adjusting salary levels based on from what was originally proposed versus what you submit in eGrants. I think Chris covered this earlier. You can certainly make adjustments to your budget in terms of what you submit. Just make sure you're justifying, and also make sure that you're not exceeding the total amount that was approved. There was a question around, if our project period, what we're proposing, is not for a full 33 months, do we need to do the reporting for the full 33 months? Chris, you wanna tackle that one?
Sure. No, if your end date is prior to the 33-month expiration period, you would submit final reports for whenever your project ended. You would just submit final reports in, and that would stop the reporting cycle for that project.
Okay, perfect. And I think, Chris, there was some questions around kind of the frequency that an organization can invoice. So I think you covered this a little bit, but just to be clear, is there a limit to how frequently organizations can submit fiscal reports and request reimbursement?
No, I would say the most frequent, other than quarterly, would be monthly. But no, there is no limit.
Okay. We had another question around if the initial request that the organization submitted exceeded the maximum amount of 225,000, should we decrease our budget request to 225? Yes, that is correct. So the amount that you are approved for is a maximum, whatever was communicated to you through that email, and so you'll need to work within that maximum parameter within your formal application. The same person asked if we will be able to print out a blank copy of the application to review before we begin to answer the questions on the application. Definitely, we plan to make information available about what we're asking for. Certainly encourage you to check out the eGrant system to make sure you understand kind of how to navigate that. But we'll also be making sure that you know what information you'll be asked to provide within that system, similar to what we did with the initial request form survey question summary as well. The question was, will the narrative questions be available before September 1? Well, September 1 is almost here, so I'll probably say no, but we will make sure that folks have that as soon as they're available. Our next question is around kind of personnel changes throughout the life of the grant. So Heather, maybe you can answer this one. If somebody registers as the administrator and that person leaves the organization, how hard is it to change the person assigned to that role?
It's actually very easy. The new person would just need to register in EGrants, have the correct security roles, and then you can go into the application and actually change the contact. So the person that has left, you just remove them. We can inactivate their access. So yeah, very, very easy.
Thanks, Heather. This question is around sort of other additional grants and funding streams. And I'm going to go ahead just looking at the time and say this may be our last question. So if we didn't get to something that you asked, again, feel free to email us and we'll do our best to follow up. But this question asks, what if I receive another grant for violence prevention for a similar project? Can I combine both funding to provide salary for staff, benefits, and other expenses for project work? And serve more youth that was written for both grants? Is that allowable? And how do I prevent overlapping and double dipping? This person says not sure of proper term. I think that is an excellent question. And Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you have any advice or thoughts to share.
Yeah, sure. So yes, you can certainly combine other funding streams available to your organization to implement whatever project it is that you're implementing. However, I think this is a good time just to reinforce that PCCD, there are accounting system requirements. So you should have an accounting system that can track all the revenue that you receive from PCCD and the expenditures that you would make with the grant funds that you receive from PCCD separately from other funding streams. So you should have an account code, a general ledger account set up for your PCCD revenue, PCCD expenditures within your accounting system, so that when we may ask to see it, we will ask to see it, that your expenditures are separated from other expenditures for the same program. There should be a way for you to show that to us so that we can tell what our grant funds actually paid for. And you should also have documentation available. For example, personnel, if you're employing someone, they're going to have to keep time and effort reports or timesheets so that we can go back and see how many hours they actually spent on the funded project. And does that then match up to what your accounting records say and what you submitted in EGrants and reported as an expenditure for that person? I know that's kind of getting a little bit into the weeds here with that. There is a lot of information available on our website around grant funding and requirements and what the accounting system requirements are and kind of how we monitor. And that's also a topic we'll cover when we have our initial meeting with each of the agencies that receive funding. We'll kind of go over some of the requirements and answer questions such as this. So I'll stop there. I hope I answered that question well enough. And if not, if you have additional questions, please reach out. We're more than happy to kind of walk you through what's required and to ensure that you're documenting your expenditures correctly so that when you are asked to produce that documentation, you have it available and you're confident that you're giving us what we need.
Thanks, Chris. Like I said, hard to believe, but we are out of time. I did just want to provide you all with a quick update and note again, we did provide the link and information to our resource account for general questions about this grant program. So that's different than the EGrants resource account that Heather mentioned earlier. So if you do have any questions or wanted to clarify anything that you've heard on today's virtual session, please feel free to email that resource account that's linked in the announcement section, and we can certainly follow up with you. In addition, we'll also be available as the eGrants application opens up if you have any questions that are specific to those components. So what you're seeing on this slide here is just a recap again of the additional resources and assistance that is available to you as you start this process. You can see there is the email address and the phone number for our eGrant system help desk that Heather walked y'all through. You can also continue to check out information and updates that will be made available on PCCD's gun violence webpage under the Gun Violence Grants and Funding tab. And again, that will include slides from today's session, so you can reference and click through all of the links that were included and referenced today. And then last but not least, you'll see there is a link to our application and grants guides, which really provide a much more in-depth review of all of the different components of the eGrants and application process. And so encourage folks to check that out as well. We really appreciate your time today and also appreciate the work that you are doing day to day to make your communities safer. So thank you for submitting a request. Thank you for engaging in this process. And thank you so much for being part of our virtual orientation session today. Hope you all have a great afternoon.